Summer, 1998. A time of innocence for many American families. The internet was still in its infancy. Cell phones were bulky luxuries. Few people owned. Children played outside until streetlights flickered on, and Wonderland Park, nestled in the small town of Millfield, Connecticut, was supposed to be the pinnacle of summer vacation for local families and tourists alike. No one could have predicted that the aging amusement park, with its peeling paint and creaking rides, would become the epicenter of one of the most disturbing unsolved mysteries of the decade. July 17, 1998. A Friday. The temperature climbed to 88 degrees by noon. Humidity hung in the air like a wet blanket. Perfect weather for the water attractions at Wonderland Park. It was just another busy summer day, recalled Eleanor Prescott, who worked the ticket booth that season. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary, nothing that would make you think, that would make you suspect. Her voice trails off in the recorded interview. Even 27 years later, the memories remained painful. By the end of that day, 7 children would vanish without a trace from within the park's boundaries. 7 families would be changed forever, and a small Connecticut town would never be the same. The first to disappear was 12-year-old Noah Fleming. Noah was visiting the park with his parents and younger sister. According to police reports, the Fleming family had arrived at Wonderland around 10:15 that morning. By 11:30, Noah had convinced his parents to let him ride the Typhoon, the park's signature roller coaster, while they took his 8-year-old sister to the nearby kiddie area. "We told him to meet us by the ice cream stand afterward," Noah's mother, Diane Fleming, told investigators through tears. He never showed up. Security camera footage, grainy and intermittent as it was in 1998, showed Noah exiting the Typhoon ride at 11:47 a.m. He appeared to be alone, walking normally toward the center of the park. At 11:52, another camera captured him passing the Hall of Mirrors. That was the last confirmed sighting of Noah Fleming. Diane and Robert Fleming reported their son missing to park security at 12:35 p.m. A search of the immediate area turned up nothing. Park staff made announcements over the PA system. Security guards checked bathrooms, restaurants, and ride queues. Noah had simply vanished. As the search for Noah intensified within the park, 13-year-old twins Olivia and Ethan Reeves were separating from their summer camp group near the park's west entrance. The twins were part of a day trip organized by Lakeside Summer Camp. 24 children and 4 counselors had arrived at Wonderland just after 11 a.m. According to Counselor Jessica Winters, the children were divided into groups of 6, each supervised by 1 adult. "We had strict buddy systems in place," Winters insisted during questioning. No child was supposed to be alone at any time. Yet somehow, between 12:15 and 12:45 p.m., Olivia and Ethan Reeves managed to slip away from their group of 6, which had been exploring the Western Game Arcade area. They said they wanted to check out the new virtual reality simulator. Their assigned counselor, Thomas Weber, later explained, "I told them to wait until we all finished the skee-ball games. When I turned around 5 minutes later, they were gone." Webers immediately alerted the other counselors, and a search began within their section of the park. By 1:10 p.m., park security had been notified of 2 more missing children. The security camera covering the Western Arcade entrance showed the twins entering at 12:22 p.m. No camera captured them leaving. As park security scrambled to coordinate the growing search, 10-year-old Zoe Patterson was separated from her father near the Wonderland food court. James Patterson, a single father, had brought his daughter to celebrate her birthday. They had spent the morning enjoying rides and were stopping for lunch around 1:30. "It was incredibly crowded," Patterson recalled. "I had Zoe right beside me while we were in line at Burger Bonanza. I reached for my wallet to pay, and when I looked down again, she was gone. It couldn't have been more than 30 seconds. Patterson immediately alerted nearby staff. Security footage showed Zoe standing in line at 1:32 p.m. At 1:33 p.m., the camera briefly lost feed. a common occurrence with the park's outdated security system. When the image returned 7 seconds later, Zoe was no longer in line with her father. The camera angle didn't show where she went. No other cameras in the vicinity captured her leaving the area. By 1:45 p.m., park security was now dealing with 4 missing children reports within a span of just over 3 hours. At approximately 2:15 p.m., 11-year-old Miguel Alvarez reportedly told his mother he needed to use the restroom. They were waiting in line for the pirate ship ride in the eastern section of the park. I pointed him to the bathrooms just across from the ride entrance, Elena Alvarez stated. I could see the door from where I was standing. I watched him walk in. 10 minutes passed, and he hadn't come out. Growing concerned, Elena asked a male park employee to check the bathroom. Miguel wasn't inside. The only camera near the restrooms showed Miguel entering at 2:17 p.m. No camera captured him exiting. The bathroom had a single entrance-exit door and no windows. By 2:30 p.m., park security was now facing an unprecedented crisis. 5 children had disappeared within the boundaries of Wonderland Park in less than 4 hours. The final 2 disappearances occurred almost simultaneously, on opposite sides of the park. At approximately 3:05 p.m., 14-year-old Lily Hammond separated from her best friend Alexandra near the Wonderland Ferris wheel. We were supposed to ride together, Alexandra told police. But when we got to the front of the line, Lily said she forgot her sunglasses on a bench. She told me to go ahead, and she had catch the next ride. When Alexandra completed her ride at approximately 3:12 p.m., Lily was nowhere to be found. Alexandra searched nearby benches but found no sunglasses. She waited 15 minutes before alerting a park employee. Security footage showed Lily walking away from the Ferris wheel line at 3:06 p.m. She appeared to be heading toward a row of benches but never arrived within camera view. The 7th and final disappearance was 9-year-old Daniel Thompson, who was at the park with his older brother Jason, 16, and their grandparents. At approximately 3:10 p.m., the brothers were in the arcade near the south entrance. Jason reported that Daniel wanted to play a different game and walked to a machine about 20 feet away. I could see him from where I was standing, Jason insisted through tears. I was watching him. Then some big guy walked between us, and when he passed, Danny was just gone. The arcade camera footage confirmed Jason's account. At 3:11 p.m., Daniel was visible playing a racing game. A tall man in a dark jacket walked between the camera and Daniel when the man passed out of frame at 3:12 p.m. Daniel was no longer at the machine. By 3:30 p.m., Wonderland Park was in chaos. Park manager Walter Briggs made the decision to initiate a full lockdown at 3:45 p.m. All park exits were closed. Guests were instructed to remain where they were while security conducted a thorough search. Local police arrived at 3:52 p.m., responding to multiple missing persons reports. By 4:30 p.m., the FBI had been contacted due to the unusual nature and number of disappearances. I have never seen anything like it, said Detective Raymond Hughes, one of the first responding officers. One missing child at an amusement park that happens. Kids wander off, but 7 children, all disappearing without witnesses, without evidence, some from areas with seemingly no exit. It was immediately clear we were dealing with something unprecedented. FBI Special Agent Diana Moore arrived with a team at 6:15 p.m. By then, the park had been fully evacuated except for staff, and a massive search operation was underway. Every bathroom, storage closet, maintenance tunnel, and ride compartment was examined. Dogs were brought in to track scents. Nothing was found. No clothing, no personal items, no signs of struggle. 7 children had vanished into thin air. The investigation that followed would become one of the most extensive missing persons cases in Connecticut history. The FBI established a command center in the Wonderland Park administrative offices. More than 50 agents were assigned to the case. Hundreds of park employees and guests were interviewed. Every frame of security footage was analyzed. The findings were disturbing in their emptiness. None of the children appeared distressed in their final moments on camera. None showed any signs of being coerced or followed. They simply walked out of frame and disappeared. Even more troubling was the pattern that emerged from the security footage analysis. In each case, there was some kind of camera malfunction, power flicker, or blind spot that coincided exactly with the moment of disappearance, explained FBI technical analyst Victor Reynolds. It's as if someone knew precisely where the surveillance weak points were. This revelation turned investigators' attention toward the park itself and its employees. Wonderland Park had opened in 1965, the project of eccentric local businessman Howard Pierce. For nearly 2 decades, it had been a modest success, drawing crowds from across New England. But by the early 1990s, larger theme parks had made Wonderland seem outdated and quaint. Financial records showed the park had been struggling for years. Maintenance budgets had been slashed, staff had been reduced, safety inspections had been postponed or abbreviated. In 1997, just 1 year before the disappearances, ownership had changed hands. A corporation called Thrill Ventures International had purchased Wonderland for a surprisingly low price. Little was known about TVI. It appeared to be a holding company with obscure ownership. The corporate structure was deliberately opaque, said FBI financial investigator Simone Taylor. Shell companies within shell companies. Offshore accounts. It took us months to determine who actually owned Wonderland Park. The answer, when it finally emerged, only deepened the mystery. Thrill Ventures International was primarily owned by the Radcliffe Foundation, a private entity established by Jeremiah Radcliffe, a reclusive businessman who had made his fortune in pharmaceuticals during the night. Radcliffe himself had died in 1994, but his foundation continued operating under a board of trustees, most of whom had connections to Radcliffe's various business ventures. More disturbing was the discovery that 2 of the trustees had backgrounds in behavioral psychology and had previously worked on classified government research in the 90s. We found documentation linking Radcliffe Foundation personnel to experiments involving sensory manipulation and consciousness alteration, Agent Moore noted in her case files. Nothing explicitly illegal, but certainly ethically questionable research. When investigators dug deeper into Wonderland Park's recent renovations under TVI ownership, concerning patterns emerged. In the 6 months before the disappearances, several areas of the park had undergone what management called experience enhancements. These included new lighting systems, ambient sound installations, and what internal documents described as atmospheric optimization technology. They were making changes to the park environment that weren't just cosmetic, explained Dr. Harriet Kleinman, a psychologist who consulted on the case. The new lighting systems pulsed at specific frequencies that research has shown can induce mild trance states. The ambient sound included infrasonic elements, sounds below the range of human hearing that can cause discomfort, disorientation, even hallucinations in some people. When questioned, park management insisted these enhancements were simply meant to create a more immersive experience for guests. But internal emails suggested something more deliberate. One message from Operations Director Franklin Morris to a Radcliffe Foundation trustee dated March 1998 read, Phase 1 testing shows promising results. Subjects report increased suggestibility and temporal disorientation in treatment areas. Ready to proceed with Phase 2 once new equipment is installed. The FBI attempted to interview Morris, but discovered he had left the country just 2 days after the disappearances. His current whereabouts remained unknown. As the investigation continued, agents made another disturbing discovery in the park's maintenance tunnels. Wonderland, like many large amusement parks, had an extensive network of underground passages, allowing staff to move between areas without navigating crowds. These tunnels also housed electrical systems, water pipes, and storage. 3 weeks into the investigation, An FBI search team found a sealed door in a remote section of the tunnel network. The door was not on any park blueprints. When opened, it revealed a room approximately 15 by 20 feet. The room contained monitoring equipment, including several video screens, recording devices, and what appeared to be medical testing equipment. "It looked like some kind of observation room," said Agent Carlos Vasquez, who discovered the space. There were heart rate monitors, EEG machines for measuring brain activity, and on the walls, photographs of park guests, mostly children, with dates and what looked like test results. None of the photographs were of the 7 missing children, but the implication was clear. Someone had been monitoring and potentially experimenting on Wonderland Park guests. Even more concerning was the discovery of a filing cabinet containing hundreds of pages of observation notes. The notes detailed behavioral changes in subjects exposed to what was called the Wonderland Protocol. Subject 1117 showed increased compliance after 15-minute exposure to Area C stimuli. One entry read, "Successfully completed 3 suggested actions without conscious recall of instructions. Progress continues at expected rate." When confronted with this evidence, park management claimed no knowledge of the room or its purpose. TVI executives denied authorizing any research involving park guests. The investigation hit another roadblock when the hidden room and its contents were destroyed in what authorities termed a localized electrical fire, just hours after its discovery. Although the FBI had removed some evidence, much was lost in the blaze. Fire investigators determined the cause to be deliberate sabotage. As summer turned to fall, the case of the Wonderland 7, as the media had dubbed them, remained unsolved. No bodies were found. No ransom demands were made. No suspects were officially named. Wonderland Park remained closed indefinitely. A chain-link fence surrounded its perimeter, warning signs keeping trespassers at bay. But that didn't stop the curious from trying to enter. In October 1998, 3 teenage boys broke into the abandoned park, hoping to film a Halloween video for their local cable access show. They brought a camcorder, cutting edge for its time, and flashlights. Only one of the boys returned home. 17-year-old Trevor Walsh was found the following morning, wandering along the highway 2 miles from Wonderland. He was disoriented, unable to account for the previous 12 hours or explain what had happened to his friends. The camcorder was recovered, but the footage showed only static with occasional distorted audio, unintelligible whispers, and what sound analysts would later describe as non-human vocalizations. Walsh was hospitalized for severe dehydration and what doctors diagnosed as acute stress reaction. For weeks he spoke little, staring at walls for hours. When he finally began to communicate again, his account was fragmented, contradictory. "They are still there," he repeated. "They are still in the park, but they are not. They are not themselves anymore. They are part of it now. They are in the lights and the sounds and the air." Psychiatric evaluations suggested Walsh was suffering from traumatic delusions. His friends, Michael Danning and Peter Galloway, were never found. The FBI briefly reopened its investigation but found no new evidence. The park remained under guard, but no further searches were conducted inside its boundaries. By December 1998, public interest in the case had begun to wane. Holiday news pushed the Wonderland mystery from front pages. The families of the missing children continued to plead for answers, but leads had dried up. Then came the package. On December 21, 1998, each of the 7 families received an identical small box in the mail. The packages had no return address, but postmarks indicated they had been mailed from Burlington, Vermont, a city with no obvious connection to the case. Inside each box was a single item, a small, clear glass sphere, about the size of a marble, and a note printed on plain paper that read simply, "They are where they always wanted to be. They are happier now." FBI analysis of the spheres revealed nothing unusual. They appeared to be ordinary glass bowls. the kind found in children's games or decorative items. No fingerprints were recovered from either the spheres or the notes. The handwriting analysis was inconclusive. The printing was deliberate, possibly disguised. The paper and ink were common brands available at any office supply store. The Burlington lead proved a dead end. Security cameras at the post office showed a figure in a hooded coat mailing the packages, but their face was never visible to the cameras. As 1998 drew to a close, the investigation stalled. The FBI maintained a task force, but agents were gradually reassigned to other cases. The families of the missing children turned to private investigators, psychics, anyone who might provide answers. Wonderland Park remained closed, its rides slowly rusting, its once bright paint fading in the New England weather. Thrill Ventures International filed for bankruptcy in early 1999, citing insurmountable financial damages resulting from the tragedy. The park property fell into legal limbo, tied up in court proceedings and insurance investigations. No buyers showed interest. It became an eyesore, a painful reminder of 7 lives interrupted. Or perhaps, as some in Millfield began to whisper, 7 lives transformed. Because the strange occurrences didn't end with the park's closure. Residents whose homes bordered Wonderland reported unusual phenomena in the months and years that followed. Lights seen moving through the abandoned park at night. Sounds, music, laughter, mechanical whirs emanating from rides that had no power. And sometimes, just visible through the trees or over the fence, the fleeting glimpse of children running, playing, always just out of clear view. Police investigated dozens of reports, never finding evidence of trespassers. Motion-activated cameras set up around the perimeter captured nothing unusual. Yet the sightings continued. Most disturbing were the dreams. People throughout Millfield, particularly children, began reporting vivid dreams about Wonderland. Dreams where the park was alive, vibrant, more magical than it had ever been in reality. Dreams where the missing children invited them to come play and join us forever. Several families moved away from Millfield, citing their children's growing obsession with these dreams and with the abandoned park. "My daughter started sleepwalking," reported one mother who requested anonymity. "3 times we found her outside, halfway to Wonderland, still asleep. The 3rd time, she was clinging to the fence, crying because she couldn't get in. When we woke her, she screamed that they were calling her, that they needed more friends." Child psychologists attributed the dreams to community trauma, the power of suggestion, and media coverage. Yet the pattern was unusual enough to warrant documentation in several psychological journals. In January 1999, a startling development briefly reignited national interest in the case. A security guard patrolling the Wonderland perimeter discovered graffiti on the main entrance gate. 7 sets of handprints in different colors, at heights consistent with children of various ages. Forensic analysis confirmed the paint was still wet when discovered. More significantly, preliminary tests indicated the handprints matched the general size and pattern of the missing children's hands. For the families, this discovery brought both hope and deeper anguish. Were their children alive? Were they being held somewhere nearby? Or was this a cruel hoax? Further testing proved inconclusive. While the handprints were consistent with the missing children's measurements, experts couldn't definitively match them to specific individuals without more detailed prints for comparison. The FBI organized another sweep of the park and surrounding areas, using additional resources including thermal imaging equipment. Again, no evidence of the children's presence was found. The handprints remained unexplained. Another piece in an increasingly bizarre puzzle. As winter gave way to spring, a new pattern emerged that would forever link the Wonderland disappearances to something beyond conventional criminal investigation. Children who had visited Wonderland Park in the months leading up to the disappearances began exhibiting unusual behaviors. Parents reported their children drawing the same symbol repeatedly, a spiral within a 5-pointed star. The children couldn't explain why they drew it or what it meant. They simply felt compelled to create it. Some children began speaking of the Wonderland friends, entities they described as not quite people who visited them in dreams and whispered secrets. Most disturbing were the incidents of children found sleepwalking toward the abandoned park. Between March and June 1999, local police documented 17 cases of children under 15 being discovered outside at night, all heading in the direction of Wonderland. When awakened, many gave similar accounts of hearing music and children's voices, calling them to come play and become part of the magic. Child psychiatrist Dr. Lauren Murray, who treated several affected children, noted similarities in their descriptions that defied explanation. These children had no contact with each other, Dr. Murray stated in her case notes, yet they all described identical experiences. The same music, the same voices, saying the same phrases, even the same special place inside the park where the real magic happens. The consistency across unrelated cases suggests something beyond mass hysteria or suggestion. That special place, according to the children's accounts, was a previously unremarkable attraction called the Wonder Wheel, a standard Ferris wheel that had operated in the park since its opening in the children's dreams and stories. However, the Wonder Wheel was described as a door or a way through to somewhere else, somewhere better than here. When investigators reviewed the original case files, they made a chilling discovery. Each of the 7 missing children had ridden the Wonder Wheel on the day of their disappearance. This detail had seemed insignificant at the time. The Ferris wheel was one of the park's most popular attractions, but in light of the new information, it took on ominous importance. FBI agents returned to Wonderland in July 1999, focusing their investigation on the Wonder Wheel and its immediate surroundings. What they found raised more questions than answers. The Ferris wheel, unlike most attractions in the park, showed no signs of deterioration despite a year of exposure to the elements. While other rides were rusting, their paint peeling, the Wonder Wheel appeared almost pristine, its white paint gleaming, its lights intact. It looked like it had been maintained, noted Agent Vasquez. But there were no signs of human activity around it. No footprints, no tools, no evidence anyone had been there. More puzzling were the readings from the electromagnetic field, EMF detectors. Agents brought to examine the site. The Wonder Wheel emanated EM radiation at levels far exceeding what would be expected from a non-operational amusement ride. The readings were off the charts, explained technical analyst Reynolds. The kind of energy signature you might expect from a large power station or industrial transformer, not from a simple Ferris wheel. Yet there was no visible power source. The park's electricity had been shut off months earlier. No generators were present. No batteries could account for the energy detected. When agents attempted to take material samples from the Wonder Wheel for analysis, they encountered another anomaly. Their tools, steel bolt cutters, industrial drills, even a portable circular saw failed to function when brought within 6 feet of the structure. It was like the laws of physics just changed near that thing. One agent noted in his report, equipment that worked perfectly 20 feet away simply died when brought closer. The investigation reached an impasse. Without the ability to examine the Wonder Wheel more closely, agents could only observe and document its unexplainable properties. A decision was made to establish 24-hour surveillance of the structure. Cameras and monitoring equipment were set up at a safe distance beyond the range where electronic failures occurred. For 3 days, nothing unusual was recorded. Then, on the 4th night, at exactly 3:33 a.m., every piece of surveillance equipment simultaneously malfunctioned for precisely 7 minutes. When the systems came back online, the Wonder Wheel was gone. Not damaged, not dismantled, simply gone, as if it had never existed. In its place was an empty concrete foundation, with no debris or evidence of how a massive steel structure could have been removed without a trace. The FBI investigation was officially classified as inconclusive. 1 month later, the case files remained open, but active investigations ceased. Wonderland Park was eventually demolished in 2001 after years of legal battles. A shopping center now stands where children once laughed and played, and where 7 children vanished without explanation. The families never received closure. The children were never found. But in Millfield, the whispers continue. The dreams persist. And sometimes on summer nights when the air is still and heavy, people report hearing distant carousel music and children's laughter carried on the breeze. Because whatever happened at Wonderland Park in the summer of 1998 defied conventional understanding. 7 children didn't just disappear. They went somewhere else, somewhere beyond the reach of investigators and grieving families, somewhere perhaps not meant for human knowledge. The true horror wasn't just inside the park. The true horror was what the park itself had become. 2003, 5 years after the disappearances, Detective Leah Donovan had never intended to reopen the Wonderland case. As a newcomer to the Millfield Police Department, she had heard whispers about the 7 missing children, of course. It was impossible to live in the town without feeling the shadow of that summer day but the case was considered cold, a tragic mystery that had defeated the best efforts of local police and federal investigators alike, until the postcards started arriving. The first appeared on July 17, 2003, exactly 5 years after the disappearances. Noah Fleming's parents received a standard tourist postcard showing the Santa Monica Pier. The message, written in childish handwriting, was simple. "I'm still riding. It's wonderful here." It was signed, Noah. Handwriting analysis compared the signature to Noah's school assignments. The experts called it inconclusive, neither a definitive match nor a clear forgery. The postmark was genuine, dated July 12, 2003, from Santa Monica, California. 1 week later, Miguel Alvarez's family received a similar card, this one showing the Gateway Arch in St. Louis. "The view from up here is amazing. I can see forever now," signed Miguel. Over the following month, all 7 families received postcards, each from a different landmark across America, each with a short message that seemed to reference their child's continued existence somewhere. It could be a cruel hoax, Donovan's supervisor, Chief Wallace Riley, told her when assigning her to investigate the postcards. Probably is. Some sick individual getting their kicks from reopening these wounds. And if it's not? Donovan asked. Riley's expression darkened. Then we are dealing with something I don't even want to contemplate. 7 children who disappeared without a trace, suddenly sending messages 5 years later. Either they have been held captive all this time. He didn't finish the thought. He didn't need to. The alternative, that something beyond conventional understanding had occurred, wasn't something law enforcement was equipped to address. Detective Donovan began by reviewing the original case files. Thousands of pages of interviews, evidence logs, forensic reports, and theories. The FBI's involvement had been extensive, but ultimately fruitless. No bodies, no suspects, no resolution. The postcards themselves yielded little useful evidence. Standard souvenir stock available at gift shops across the country. The handwriting showed similarities to samples from the missing children, but experts couldn't definitively attribute them, especially considering 5 years would have passed, changing how the children wrote. No usable fingerprints were recovered aside from postal workers and the recipients. Video surveillance from the various mailing locations showed nothing suspicious, just crowds of tourists, none identifiable as the missing children or potential abductors. It seemed like another dead end until Donovan noticed something odd about the postcards themselves. "Look at the images," she explained to Chief Riley, spreading the 7 cards on his desk. "What do you see?" Riley studied them. Tourist attractions. The Santa Monica Pier, the Gateway Arch, the Washington Monument, the Golden Gate Bridge, Niagara Falls, the Space Needle, the Liberty Bell. What about them? Put them in the order they were received, Donovan instructed. Riley rearranged the cards, then stepped back. "I still don't see it. Connect the locations on a map," Donovan said. unfolding a map of the United States she had prepared. Red dots marked each location, with lines connecting them in sequence. Riley's eyes widened. The pattern was unmistakable, a 5-pointed star with a spiral in its center, the same symbol the children were drawing. Riley whispered. Exactly, Donovan confirmed. This wasn't random. Someone deliberately chose these locations and this sequence to recreate that symbol across the entire United States. But why? What does it mean? I don't know, Donovan admitted. But I think we need to look more closely at what was happening at Wonderland Park before the disappearances. The FBI found evidence of experiments, right? Behavioral modification, consciousness alteration. What if those experiments had unintended consequences? Riley looked uncomfortable. You were getting into X-Files territory, detective. Maybe, Donovan conceded. But 7 children vanished without a trace. The Wonder Wheel disappeared without explanation. And now these postcards forming a pattern that matches what affected children were compulsively drawing. Something connects it all. After a moment's hesitation, Riley nodded. Follow the evidence wherever it leads. But be careful, Donovan. There's a reason the FBI walked away from this case. Leah Donovan's investigation led her to Dr. Evelyn Thorne, a neuropsychologist who had consulted on the original FBI investigation, but whose contributions had been largely redacted from the official files. Now retired and living in a remote cabin in Vermont, Dr. Thorne was initially reluctant to discuss the case. Some doors are better left closed. Detective, she warned when Donovan arrived unannounced at her home. Some knowledge isn't meant for human minds, but the postcards changed her mind. When Donovan showed her the pattern they formed, Thorne's professional composure cracked. They are still active, she whispered. The gateway is still open. What gateway? Donovan pressed. What was really happening at Wonderland? Thorne's explanation began conventionally enough. Jeremiah Radcliffe, the pharmaceutical magnate whose foundation had acquired Wonderland Park, had indeed been involved in controversial research, particularly in the field of consciousness manipulation. In the 1970s, Radcliffe's companies developed drugs for the military, Thorne explained. Compounds designed to enhance interrogation, increase suggestibility, even induce specific mental states. Most of this research was officially discontinued after congressional hearings in the late 70s, but Radcliffe continued privately. His particular obsession, according to Thorne, was the concept of dimensional consciousness, the theory that human perception is limited to only a small portion of existing reality. Radcliffe believed there were other dimensions, other planes of existence, overlapping with our own, Thorne continued. He thought certain mental states could allow humans to perceive, even access these other dimensions. His early experiments with chemical compounds yielded inconsistent results. But in the early 1990s, Radcliffe's researchers discovered that combinations of specific visual stimuli, sound frequencies, and electromagnetic fields could alter brain activity in predictable ways. They called it environmental induction, Thorne said. Rather than using drugs to change consciousness, they created environments that would trigger the desired brain states naturally, which was where Wonderland Park entered the picture. An amusement park is the perfect laboratory, Thorne explained. People expect to have altered experiences there. The excitement, the disorientation, the lights and sounds. No one questions feeling different at a theme park. And children, with their more plastic neural pathways, are especially responsive to these influences. When Radcliffe died in 1994, his research might have died with him, but his protégés, now controlling the Radcliffe Foundation, saw an opportunity to advance his work on a massive scale. They purchased Wonderland Park specifically to implement environmental induction technology, Thorne said. The renovations, the experience enhancements, they were creating a machine for consciousness manipulation disguised as entertainment. But to what end? Donovan asked. What were they trying to achieve? Thorne's expression grew troubled. Radcliffe's ultimate goal was contact, opening a stable gateway between our dimension and what he called adjacent realities. His notes described entities existing in these other dimensions, entities that could only be perceived in certain altered states. You are talking about what? Ghosts? Aliens? Neither, Thorne said firmly. Something else entirely. Radcliffe called them the inhabitants. Consciousness without physical form as we understand it. Not supernatural, just operating according to different natural laws than those governing our dimensional space. According to Thorne, Radcliffe believed these entities were trying to communicate with humans, perhaps even help them evolve beyond physical limitations. His journals described visions of a world where human consciousness could exist independent of bodies, where people could move between dimensions freely. He thought he was working toward human transcendence, Thorne said. But I think something else was happening. I think these inhabitants were manipulating him, using his research for their own purposes. Which were? Donovan prompted. To open a door, Thorne said simply. A permanent gateway between their realm and ours, and once opened, to bring others through. The implication hung in the air between them. The children, Donovan whispered, you are suggesting these entities took the 7 children who disappeared. Not took, Thorne corrected. Transformed. The environmental induction technology at Wonderland Park was designed to make certain individuals, particularly children, receptive to dimensional shift. The Wonder Wheel was the focal point, the place where the electromagnetic field was strongest, where the visual and auditory stimuli converged most perfectly. You were saying those children, what? Turned into energy? Stepped into another dimension? I'm saying their consciousness transferred from physical bodies to something else. Thorne clarified. Something that could exist in the inhabitants' dimensional space. It sounded impossible, ludicrous, yet it explained the lack of physical evidence, the children vanishing from secured areas, the Wonder Wheel's disappearance. The postcards, Donovan said suddenly. If what you are saying is true, how do you explain the postcards? The gateway works both ways, Thorne said quietly. The children, or what they have become, can still reach back into our world in limited ways. The symbol they are creating with the locations, it's a mapping. They are marking points where the barrier between dimensions is thinnest. For what purpose? To open more doors, Thorne said, her voice dropping to a whisper, to bring more children through. Donovan left Vernon with more questions than answers. Dr. Thorne's explanations veered so far from conventional understanding that they were difficult to accept. Yet they fit the evidence in ways no traditional theory could. Back in Millfield, she focused on a more tangible aspect of the investigation. Franklin Morris, the operations director who had fled immediately after the disappearances. International agencies had been unable to locate Morris in 1998, but in 2003, with improved database systems and cooperation, Donovan found a lead, a man matching Morris's description working at a remote research station in northern Norway. The Norwegian authorities were cooperative, sending officers to interview the man identified as Frederick Mikkelsen, a research assistant at a facility studying atmospheric phenomena. When confronted with his true identity, Morris didn't resist. I have been expecting someone to find me eventually, he told the Norwegian officers in the recorded interview. I'm surprised it took this long. Morris was extradited to the United States 2 weeks later. Detective Donovan was waiting when he arrived in custody at Logan International Airport in Boston. I didn't hurt those children, were his first words to her. I tried to stop what was happening. That's why I ran, not from justice, but from them. Them? Donovan asked. The inhabitants, Morris said, using the same term Dr. Thorne had. They are real, detective, and they are patient. They have been trying to establish a foothold in our reality for a very long time. Over a series of interviews, Morris revealed his role in the Wonderland experiments. He had been hired by the Radcliffe Foundation in 1997 to implement the environmental induction technology at the park. "I thought we were doing cognitive research," he explained, "studying how environmental factors influence decision-making, emotional responses." The Foundation described it as work that would revolutionize education, therapy, even entertainment. It wasn't until later that I realized there was another agenda entirely. According to Morris, the technology worked better than anticipated. Within months of the renovations, park guests, particularly children, were showing heightened receptivity to subtle suggestions embedded in the park environment. Nothing sinister at first, he clarified. Simple behavior modifications. Guests would feel drawn to certain areas, experience specific emotional responses, make choices we had subtly influenced. It was remarkable data. But as the experiments progressed, unexpected phenomena began to occur. Staff reported equipment malfunctions, unexplained temperature fluctuations, and strange visual and auditory anomalies throughout the park. The most concerning incidents involved the Wonder Wheel, Morris continued. It began operating outside of programmed parameters. Lights would activate when the power was off. The wheel would sometimes rotate slightly overnight, though the brakes were engaged, and staff and guests reported seeing reflections that didn't match the people casting them. By spring 1998, Morris had become concerned enough to begin documenting these anomalies separately from his official reports to the Foundation. He installed additional monitoring equipment around the Wonder Wheel without authorization, the hidden room the FBI would later discover. "What I recorded there convinced me something dangerous was happening," Morris said. "The electromagnetic readings were off the charts, and the audio captured voices, conversations that weren't coming from any guests or staff, voices discussing the subjects, debating which ones were most suitable for transition." When Morris brought his concerns to his superiors at the Radcliffe Foundation, he was instructed to continue the experiment as planned. The anomalies, he was told, were expected outcomes of breakthrough contact. "They knew," Morris said, his voice hollow. "They knew what was happening, and they welcomed it." Radcliffe's disciples believed he had discovered something transcendent, a way for human consciousness to evolve beyond physical limitations. They saw the entities as guides, teachers helping us advance to the next stage of existence. Morris disagreed. The audio he had captured, the patterns of behavior he had observed, suggested something more predatory. The entities weren't offering evolution. They were harvesting consciousness, using human minds for purposes he couldn't comprehend. "I plan to shut down the induction systems on July 18, Morris said. "I had reprogrammed the park's central controls to purge the specific frequencies and visual patterns that facilitated the contact. But they acted first." "They?" Donovan asked. "The entities or the Foundation?" "Both," Morris replied. By then, I don't think there was much distinction. The Foundation leadership had been influenced, changed. They were serving the entity's agenda, whether they realized it or not. On July 17, 1998, the day of the disappearances, Morris arrived at the park to find his access codes no longer worked. He was locked out of the control systems. When he confronted the park manager, Walter Briggs, he was informed that his services were no longer required and that he should leave immediately. "I knew something was wrong with Briggs," Morris recalled. His eyes, there was something moving behind them. Something that wasn't him. "I tried to warn him about what was happening, but he just smiled and said, 'The transition has already begun. The first 7 will open the way for others.'" Morris left the park but remained nearby, watching from the parking lot. He witnessed the chaos as the missing children reports began, saw the police arrive, watched the FBI take control of the scene. "I should have come forward then," he admitted. "But I was afraid, not just of legal consequences, but of them. I had heard those voices discussing distant elements and how they would be neutralized. I believed, still believe, they would have killed me before I could tell what I knew." So he fled, using cash and false identification to make his way to Europe. eventually settling in Norway under an assumed identity. "Why come clean now?" Donovan asked. "What changed?" Morris reached into his pocket and removed a small, clear glass sphere, identical to those the families had received in December. "This appeared on my desk at the research station 3 weeks ago," he said. "No package, no explanation, just sitting there when I returned from lunch. And since then, I have been having the dreams." "Dreams?" "About the children," Morris explained. "They speak to me, tell me they are changing, growing stronger, learning to reach back into our world more effectively, and they need more to join them." "More children," Donovan said. Morris nodded grimly. "The postcards are just the beginning. They are mapping the thin places, points where our reality and theirs intersect most closely. They are preparing for something bigger." "What happens at these thin places?" Donovan asked. "Influence bleeds through," Morris explained. "Children near these locations will begin experiencing the same effects we created at Wonderland: altered perception, increased suggestibility, attraction to certain symbols and sounds. They will start to hear the voices, see glimpses of the other side, and eventually, if the connection grows strong enough, they will disappear like the Wonderland 7. Donovan finished. "Exactly," Morris confirmed. "But not just 7 this time. Many more. The inhabitants are planning something much larger in scale." "When?" "July 17, 2003, Morris said. "The 5-year anniversary. That's when the alignment will be strongest, when the gateway can open widest." Donovan checked her watch. "That's 3 days from now." "Yes," Morris said, "and we have to stop it." The next 72 hours were a blur of activity. Donovan worked with federal authorities to establish monitoring at each of the 7 locations identified in the postcards. Morris, granted limited immunity in exchange for his cooperation, worked with a team of scientists to develop countermeasures against the phenomena he had helped create. Families with children were discreetly encouraged to avoid the identified landmarks during the anniversary period. Security was enhanced. Monitoring equipment was installed. All the while, reports trickled in of children across the country, drawing the spiral star symbol, speaking of wonderful friends who visited their dreams, sleepwalking toward the 7 landmarks. The pattern was spreading, just as Morris had warned. On the morning of July 17, 2003, Detective Donovan found herself at the Santa Monica Pier, the first location in the pattern. She was accompanied by FBI Special Agent Ryan Tanner, who had been assigned as federal liaison to the case. "Still think we are chasing ghost stories?" Donovan asked as they surveyed the crowded pier from their unmarked car. Tanner, who had initially been skeptical, shook his head. "The data's too consistent across all 7 locations. EMF spikes, temperature anomalies, the number of affected children all increasing as we approach the anniversary. Something's happening." Morris says the event will peak at 3:33 p.m. in each time zone. Donovan noted, checking her watch. "That gives us 4 hours. Their radios crackled. "All units, be advised we have multiple reports of unaccompanied minors entering the pier area. At least 12 children under 15, all exhibiting similar behavior patterns, described as trance-like by witnesses." Donovan and Tanner exchanged glances. "It's starting," she said. By noon, similar reports were coming in from all 7 locations. Children were gathering, drawn to the landmarks, despite the increased security. Many appeared disoriented, as if sleepwalking. When intercepted by authorities, they became distressed, insisting they needed to join the others and step through the door. At the Santa Monica Pier, Donovan and Tanner established a makeshift command center in a maintenance building. Morris, communicating via secure video link, directed the deployment of his countermeasures devices designed to disrupt the specific electromagnetic frequencies associated with the dimensional phenomena. "The equipment needs to be placed at precise coordinates," Morris instructed. "The effect has to create a symmetric field that neutralizes the resonance pattern." Teams at each location worked feverishly to position the equipment. Meanwhile, the number of affected children continued to grow. By 2:30 p.m. Pacific Time, authorities had intercepted over 100 children attempting to reach the landmarks across the country. More disturbing were the reports of what witnesses described as visual distortions near each landmark. Security personnel and civilians alike reported seeing the air ripple like heat waves, structures appearing to bend or warp momentarily, and brief glimpses of figures that weren't quite there. At 3:15 p.m., 18 minutes before the predicted peak, all electronic communications at the Santa Monica Pier failed simultaneously. Radio, cell phones, even battery-powered equipment went dead. "It's happening just like at Wonderland," Donovan told Tanner as they switched to backup systems. "The energy disrupts electronics near the focal point." The air above the pier began to shimmer visibly. The temperature dropped 15 degrees in seconds, and the children, those authorities had managed to detain in a cordoned area, began to sing in unison, a melody no adult present recognized. "The countermeasure isn't working," Tanner said, watching the readings on their equipment flatline. "Morris said it had to be at the exact focal point," Donovan recalled, "the center of the disturbance." She looked out toward the pier's end, where the shimmering air was most intense. "It has to be there, right at the edge." Before Tanner could stop her, Donovan grabbed the portable countermeasure device, a silver case about the size of a microwave, and ran toward the disturbance. The closer she got, the more reality seemed to warp around her. The boardwalk beneath her feet appeared to stretch and contract. Sounds became distorted, and through the shimmering air, she began to see something else. Another place overlapping with the pier. It looked like an amusement park, but wrong somehow. The proportions impossible, the colors shifting in ways that hurt her eyes, and moving among the impossible architecture were figures that resembled children, but only in the broadest sense. Their forms flowed and changed, luminous and partially transparent. In the center of this vision, dominating the overlapping reality, was a massive Ferris wheel. The Wonder Wheel, she realized. But it wasn't a ride anymore. It was a spinning portal, a gap between worlds, and through it she could see more of the childlike entities waiting, reaching, and standing before the wheel. Arms outstretched in welcome were 7 figures more solid than the rest, still recognizably the missing children from Wonderland, though their eyes now shone with an inner light that was not human. "Join us," they said in unison, their voices somehow reaching her despite the dimensional barrier. "We have prepared the way. Step through and be transformed." For a moment, Donovan felt an overwhelming urge to do exactly that, to walk forward into that impossible light, to shed her physical form and become something new. Then she remembered the case files, the grieving families, the children who had never come home. With tremendous effort, she placed the countermeasure device directly at the point where the pier seemed to intersect with the other reality. Her fingers, moving as if through molasses, activated the sequence Morris had programmed. The effect was immediate and violent. The shimmering air convulsed, the temperature plummeted further. A sound like 1,000 voices screaming in frustration tore through the dimensional barrier. The 7 children, or what they had become, reacted with visible distress. Their forms flickered, their expressions changing from welcome to anger. "You cannot stop the convergence," they said, their voices now discordant. "We have waited too long. We have prepared too carefully. The door is opening." Donovan watched in horror as the countermeasure device began to spark and smoke. The reading showed it was failing, overwhelmed by the energy pouring through the dimensional rift. But just as the device seemed about to give out completely, something unexpected happened. The children detained nearby, those who had been drawn to the pier by the entity's influence, began to resist. One by one, they broke free from their trance-like states. Their unified singing faltered, dissolved into individual voices crying out in confusion and fear. The effect on the dimensional rift was dramatic. The shimmering air became unstable. the visions of the other reality flickering like a failing projection. The 7 transformed children reached out desperately, their forms beginning to fade. "Please," one of them called, a voice Donovan somehow knew belonged to Noah Fleming. "Don't close the door. We can't come back if you close it." "You don't belong there," Donovan found herself saying. "This isn't what you were meant to be." "We are more now," the children responded in unison. "We see everything. We exist everywhere. We are eternal." "You were taken," Donovan insisted. "Used. Changed against your will." "We chose," they countered. "We heard the music. We saw the wonder. We stepped through willingly." The countermeasure device gave a final desperate whine. The readings spiked one last time, and then, with a sound like air rushing into a vacuum, the dimensional rift collapsed. The shimmering vanished. The temperature returned to normal. The pier was just a pier again, solid and real and firmly anchored in a single reality. Donovan stood motionless, staring at the space where the other world had been visible. Had she really seen it? Had she really spoken to those transformed children? Or had she experienced some kind of hallucination induced by the electromagnetic anomalies? The return of her radio, squawking with urgent transmissions, brought her back to the present moment. "Donovan, do you copy?" Tanner's voice came through clearly. "I copy," she responded. "The device, it worked. The disturbance is gone." Similar reports came in from the other 6 locations. Whatever had been building, whatever doorway had been opening, had been forced closed, at least for now. But as Donovan made her way back to the command center, she couldn't shake the memory of those 7 transformed children, or their final words to her. "We will find another way. The door wants to open. It's only a matter of time." In the aftermath, explanations were constructed. Official reports described a coordinated countermeasure operation against environmental factors causing mass psychogenic illness. The affected children were treated for what doctors diagnosed as a combination of suggestion and unusual but explainable neurological responses to specific stimuli. Morris provided testimony about the Radcliffe Foundation's experiments, resulting in federal charges against surviving Foundation members. The technological aspects of the case were documented, investigated, eventually filed away in classified archives. But the dimensional aspects, the glimpses of another reality, the transformed children, the entities they called the inhabitants, these remained unaddressed in official channels, too fantastic, too outside conventional understanding to be acknowledged. Detective Donovan filed her reports, assisted with the criminal prosecutions, eventually moved on to other cases. On the surface, life returned to normal. Yet the dreams continued, not just for the children who had been affected, but for Donovan herself. Dreams of an impossible amusement park where physics bent like taffy, where consciousness flowed free from physical constraints, where 7 children with glowing eyes waited by a massive Ferris wheel that spun between worlds. And sometimes, walking through crowded places, she would notice children drawing that same spiral star symbol, or humming that same unrecognizable melody, or staring at empty air, as if seeing something just beyond normal perception. The door had been closed, but not locked. The barrier had been restored, but not reinforced. Whatever lay on the other side was still there, still watching, still waiting for another opportunity. And the 7 children who had disappeared from Wonderland Park in 1998 were still out there too, no longer fully human, no longer bound by physical form, but conscious, aware, and possibly planning their next attempt to open the way for others to join them. The real horror wasn't just inside the park. The real horror was what existed beyond it, a realm of consciousness without form, of entities without bodies, of existence without the limitations of physical reality. A realm that had touched our world once through an aging amusement park in Connecticut, and might someday find another weak point in the fabric of reality through which to reach again. A realm where 7 children still rode an impossible Ferris wheel, watching our world through the thinning barrier, and whispering to others to join them in the wonder beyond. 2013, 15 years after the disappearance, the rusted chain-link fence surrounding the former Wonderland Park property had long since become part of Millfield's landscape, a boundary between the ordinary world and a place most locals preferred to forget. Posted signs warned of prosecution for trespassing, though few needed the reminder. Even teenagers looking for thrills generally stayed away. Except for one night each year, July 17th, the anniversary of the disappearances. On that night, locals reported strange phenomena, lights moving through the overgrown property, music playing from nowhere, the distant sound of children laughing. Police patrols were doubled. Parents kept their children indoors after dark. For 15 years, the annual disturbances had remained contained to the abandoned property. Until now. Adam Pierce had been chief of the Millfield Police Department for only 6 months when the reports started coming in. Not on July 17th, but in early June 2013. Children throughout town were experiencing nightmares, sleepwalking, drawing familiar symbols, the same behaviors documented in 2003 but occurring earlier, spreading faster. "It's happening again," Detective Leah Donovan told him, placing a file on his desk. Now in her 40s, Donovan had risen to head detective, her career shaped by her involvement in the 2003 incident. But different this time, stronger. Pierce, who had transferred from Boston PD seeking a quieter posting, sighed. He had been briefed on the Wonderland case when taking the job, but had dismissed much of it as small-town superstition mixed with an unsolved cold case. "Different how?" he asked, opening the file. "The affected radius is wider," Donovan explained. In 2003, children within about 5 miles of each thin place showed symptoms. Current reports indicate effects up to 20 miles from the former park site. "And you believe these are connected to what happened before?" "I know they are," Donovan said firmly. "I have seen it before. And there's more." She produced a tablet showing a digital map, dotted with red markers. "These are reports of missing children nationwide over the past 6 months. Normally, there's no pattern to random disappearances across different jurisdictions. But look at the age range." Pierce studied the data. "All between 9 and 14 years old. The same age range as the Wonderland 7, Donovan confirmed. "And there's another pattern. Map the locations chronologically." As Pierce watched, the tablet display animated to show the disappearances in sequence. The pattern was subtle at first, but became unmistakable as more points appeared. A spiral expanding outward from Millfield, Connecticut. 23 children have vanished since January," Donovan said quietly. "No bodies, no evidence, no witnesses. Just like in..." Pierce leaned back, processing. "You think it's related to your dimensional entities?" "I think it's escalating," Donovan replied. "The pattern's different this time. Instead of marking 7 points to create a gateway, they are taking children in a spiral pattern, working their way back to the origin point. Wonderland Park." "Exactly. And based on the acceleration of disappearances, they are building towards something on the 15th anniversary. Pierce closed the file. "What do you propose?" "We need to secure the Wonderland property immediately," Donovan said. "Not just the perimeter, the entire site. And we need to contact Dr. Evelyn Thorne. She's the foremost expert on what we are dealing with." "The neuropsychologist?" "She had be in her 80s now." 84, Donovan confirmed. "And still sharp as ever. I have stayed in touch. She's been monitoring electromagnetic anomalies across the country since 2003. She warned me 3 months ago that something was building again." Pierce considered. As a career cop with 20 years of experience, his instinct was to dismiss anything veering toward the supernatural, but the data was compelling, and Donovan's reputation was sterling. "Do it," he decided, "but keep this contained. Last thing we need is panic about dimensional monsters stealing children." "There's one more thing," Donovan said hesitantly. "Franklin Morris escaped federal custody last week. Pierce recognized the name from his briefing. The operations director who helped create the technology. Yes, he was serving a 15-year sentence for his role in the Wonderland experiments. His cell was found empty during morning count on June 4th. No signs of forced entry or exit. The security footage showed him there at 3:30 a.m. check. Gone at 3:30. That's impossible. So was the Wonder Wheel disappearing? Donovan countered. Morris once told me that if the inhabitants ever reached out to him again, he wouldn't resist. I think they have recruited him. Pierce rubbed his temples. So we have missing children, dimensional entities, and now a fugitive who knows how the technology works. The barriers are weakening, Donovan said simply. What happened at Wonderland was just the beginning. What happened at Wonderland was just the beginning. Whatever is on the other side has been working for 15 years to create another gateway, a bigger one, and this time they are nearly ready. The Wonderland property had changed little since its abandonment. Nature had reclaimed much of the landscape. Vines covered rusted metal, saplings pushed through cracked concrete, wildlife nested in decaying structures. Only the main pathways remained relatively clear, as if frequently traveled despite the property's supposedly vacant status. A team of 12 officers established a secure perimeter, while Donovan led a smaller group to explore the interior. They moved cautiously, carrying not only standard equipment but also specialized devices designed by Donovan to detect the electromagnetic anomalies associated with dimensional thinning. The readings are strongest near the center, reported Officer Jamison, watching the handheld detector, where the Wonder Wheel used to be. The concrete foundation that had once supported the massive Ferris wheel remained, now cracked and weathered. But unlike the surrounding area, the circular space was completely devoid of vegetation. No grass, no weeds, no signs of life whatsoever. It's like nothing will grow here, Officer Rodriguez observed, kneeling to examine the barren ground. Nothing from our reality, Donovan murmured. Dr. Thorne theorized that areas of dimensional overlap become inhospitable to organisms from either side, a neutral zone where the laws of both realities conflict. The detector in Jamison's hand suddenly emitted a high-pitched whine. The display flashed red. Major spike, he reported. Something's happening. The air above the circular foundation began to shimmer subtly, similar to what Donovan had witnessed in Santa Monica a decade earlier. The temperature dropped noticeably. A faint, melodic humming seemed to emanate from the empty air. Pull back, Donovan ordered. Establish a perimeter 50 feet from the foundation. As the officers retreated, the phenomena intensified. The shimmering air began to coalesce, forming what appeared to be a translucent membrane stretched across the circular space. Through it, indistinct shapes moved and shifted, suggestions of structures and figures just beyond clear perception. It's like looking through frosted glass, Rodriguez whispered. The veil between dimensions, Donovan explained. It's thinner here than anywhere else, worn down by the original experiment, and whatever's been happening since. A figure approached the translucent barrier from the other side, humanoid but distorted, as if viewed through rippling water. As it drew closer, features became more distinct. A child's face pressed against the dimensional membrane, eyes glowing within a light. Donovan recognized him immediately. Noah Fleming, the boy who would now be 27 if he had aged normally, smiled. His mouth moved, but the sound that emerged was distorted, echoing strangely. Leah Donovan, the voice said, somehow knowing her. You have returned, as we knew you would. What do you want? Donovan called out. Why are you taking more children? We are preparing, Noah's distorted form replied. The convergence requires energy, consciousness that can exist in both states. Children are adaptable. Their minds accept transformation more readily. Transformation into what? Into us, came another voice. A second figure approached the barrier. Zoe Patterson, still appearing as a 10-year-old girl despite 15 years having passed. Into something beyond physical limitation. Something eternal. You are stealing their lives, Donovan accused. We are elevating them, Noah countered. Saving them from decay, from death, from the constraints of linear existence. More figures appeared behind the first two, all 7 of the Wonderland children, unchanged in appearance since 1998. Their eyes uniformly luminous with that strange inner light. The barriers are thinning, they said in unison. The time of convergence approaches. What began 15 years ago will soon be completed. The other missing children, Donovan pressed. The 23 who have disappeared recently, where are they? Transitioning, Zoe answered. Becoming like us. The first 7 opened the path. The spiral 23 are strengthening it. Soon the final 7 will complete the pattern, and the worlds will merge permanently. Final 7? The keys, they responded together. 7 children born of Millfield, connected to the original 7. Their transition will complete the cycle. A chill ran through Donovan. You are targeting specific children now. They are already chosen, Noah confirmed. Already hearing our call. Already dreaming of the wonder beyond. The dimensional membrane rippled suddenly, the images beyond it distorting further. The 7 glowing-eyed children stepped back. He comes, they said, a note of deference in their unified voices. The one who guided us, the one who showed us the way. A new figure approached the barrier. An adult man, his form more solid than the children's, his features recognizable despite the distortion. Franklin Morris, Donovan breathed. Morris smiled, placing his hand against the dimensional membrane. Unlike the children, when he spoke, his voice came through clearly.
Hello, Detective.
I tried to warn you in 2003. I tried to stop it, but now I understand. What's happening isn't an invasion, it's evolution. You disappeared from a maximum security cell, Donovan said. How? They have grown stronger, Morris explained. Learned to create temporary passages, small enough for one person to pass through, brief enough to avoid detection. They brought me here, showed me the truth, which is, reality is malleable, Morris said, his eyes now showing the same inner light as the children's. Consciousness shapes it. With enough minds working in unison, the very fabric of existence can be rewritten. That's what the inhabitants have been working toward. Not just a gateway between worlds, but a complete merging of realities. To what end? Transcendence, Morris replied simply. The inhabitants exist as pure consciousness, unfettered by physical form. They experience reality in ways we can't comprehend. All possibilities simultaneously, all timelines concurrently. They have been reaching out to humanity for centuries, offering glimpses of what we could become. By abducting children, by transforming those receptive to the process, Morris corrected. The Wonderland technology created the first stable connection, allowed the first 7 to transition fully. Now they have learned to extend their influence, to identify those whose consciousness is naturally attuned to the transition. The spiral 23, Donovan realized. Yes, each transition strengthens the connection, thins the barrier further. The final 7 will complete the pattern, a mathematical sequence that, when fulfilled, will permanently merge the dimensional planes. And what happens to everyone else when these dimensions merge? Donovan demanded. What happens to the people who aren't or receptive to transformation? Morris's expression turned pitying. Change is never without cost, Detective. Evolution demands adaptation. Those who cannot adapt, he left the implication hanging. Behind him, the 7 glowing-eyed children smiled in unison, expression both innocent and chilling. You need to be stopped, Donovan stated firmly. You tried that once, Morris reminded her. Temporary success at best. The process was delayed, not prevented. And now it's too far advanced. The spiral is nearly complete. Only the final 7 remain. We will find them first, Donovan vowed. Protect them. They are already dreaming of us, Noah interjected, his voice taking on a sing-song quality. Already drawing our symbol. Already hearing our music. They want to come to us, Leah Donovan. They want to be free. The dimensional membrane began to ripple more violently. The figures beyond it started to fade. Our time is limited, Morris said, but we will be watching. July 17th, Detective. The 15th anniversary. The pattern will be completed. The worlds will merge, and humanity will either evolve or perish. The membrane collapsed suddenly, the shimmering air dissipating. The temperature returned to normal. The humming ceased. The circular foundation was once again just weathered concrete in an abandoned amusement park. But the warning remained. Back at the Millfield Police Department, Donovan briefed Chief Pierce and Dr. Evelyn Thorne, who had arrived from Vermont earlier that day. Despite her advanced age, Thorne's mind remained razor-sharp, her knowledge of the phenomenon paralleled. The spiral pattern is significant, Thorne explained, examining the map of disappearances. In dimensional mathematics, spirals represent paths of least resistance between realities, natural weak points in the universal membrane. Morris mentioned a final 7 needed to complete some kind of pattern. Donovan reported, children from Millfield somehow connected to the original victims. Thorne nodded grimly. The Fibonacci sequence. It's appeared in my research consistently. 7 original transitions, followed by a spiral of 23, concluding with a final 7. The mathematics create a perfect resonance pattern, a dimensional harmonic, that would effectively erase the barriers between realities. And that would mean what exactly? Pierce asked, struggling to maintain his pragmatic worldview in the face of increasingly bizarre information. Catastrophic reality failure, Thorne stated bluntly. Our dimension and theirs attempting to occupy the same space, simultaneously. The laws of physics would collapse. Matter would behave unpredictably. Consciousness itself would fragment as the underlying structure of reality destabilized. The end of the world as we know it, Donovan translated. Precisely. Though the inhabitants don't perceive it that way, their consciousness exists, independent of physical laws. To them, the collapse of our reality is simply transformation. Evolution, as Morris put it. So how do we stop it? Pierce demanded. We need to identify the final 7 before the inhabitants do, Thorne said. Morris said they were connected to the original victims. We need to determine what that connection is. Donovan was already moving to the computer. I will pull the original case files, check for any connections between the families. Look beyond obvious relations, Thorne suggested. The connection could be subtle. Children born on the same dates, living at the same addresses, sharing significant life events. Within hours, they had compiled a database of every child between 9 and 14 currently living in Millfield, 36 individuals. Cross-referencing with the original Wonderland 7's information yielded interesting patterns. Look at this, Donovan said, pointing to her screen. 7 children currently living in Millfield were born on the exact same dates as the original victims, just 15 years later. Birth date resonance, Thorne murmured. It's one of the strongest connections in dimensional theory, souls entering the physical plane at harmonically aligned moments. Further investigation revealed more connections. Each of the 7 identified children lived within 1 mile of where the original victims had lived. Several attended the same schools, played on the same sports teams, even shared unusual hobbies or interests with their 15 years prior counterparts. It's like history repeating with variations, Pierce observed. Not repeating, resonating, Thorne corrected. These children exist in patterns that echo the original 7. Their consciousness naturally aligns with the dimensional frequency established in. They are easier targets, Donovan realized. The inhabitants can reach them more readily through the thinning barriers. Precisely. And if they succeed in transitioning these final 7 on the 15th anniversary, then we need to protect them, Pierce decided, his skepticism finally giving way to the weight of evidence. Bring them into protective custody before July 7th. It won't be that simple, Donovan cautioned. The influence is already affecting them. Their families will resist, not understanding the danger, and legally we are on shaky ground. I don't care about legal grounds, Pierce stated firmly. 23 children have already disappeared. I'm not losing 7 more from my town. Within 24 hours, a protection plan was implemented. The 7 identified children were placed under discreet surveillance. Their families were approached with carefully constructed explanations, not the full truth, which would have seemed ludicrous, but enough to establish cooperation. Most responded positively to warnings about a potential threat targeting specific children. Only one family, the Coopers, whose son Benjamin showed the strongest resonance patterns with Noah Fleming, refused any police involvement. We have been monitoring Benjamin closely, Donovan reported to Pierce 3 days later. The effects are progressing rapidly, sleepwalking 3 nights in a row, always heading in the direction of Wonderland. His schoolwork shows dozens of the spiral star symbols, and his mother mentioned he's been talking about friends who visit in dreams. And the parents still won't cooperate? They think it's normal childhood imagination combined with local urban legends. They have lived in Millfield less than a year, moved here from Arizona. They don't understand the history. Pierce considered the options. Keep the surveillance in place. If he attempts to leave home at night, intervene immediately. The pattern continued for the next week. All 7 identified children showed increasing signs of influence, drawing symbols, reporting strange dreams, exhibiting behavioral changes. Their surveillance teams documented each incident, building a case that convinced even the most skeptical officers that something extraordinary was occurring. Dr. Thorne, meanwhile, worked to develop countermeasures. Building on the technology used in 2003, she created more sophisticated devices designed to stabilize the dimensional barriers. The key is creating a resonance pattern that reinforces our reality's natural frequency, she explained. Like tuning a radio to eliminate static, but the energy required is substantial, and the effect will be temporary at best. How temporary? Pierce asked. Hours, perhaps. Enough to disrupt the transition ritual on July 17th, but not enough to permanently resolve the situation. Then what's the long-term solution? Thorne hesitated. There may not be one. The barriers have been thinning for 15 years. The process may be irreversible at this point. There has to be something more permanent, Donovan insisted. The inhabitants need the children to complete their pattern, right? Their consciousness somehow facilitates the transition between dimensions. Yes, Thorne confirmed. The transitional consciousness acts as a bridge, minds that can exist in both states simultaneously, anchoring the connection. Then what if we reverse the process? Could we bring the original 7 back? Thorne's eyes widened. Theoretically, perhaps. If we could locate their consciousness within the other dimension and provide sufficient energy to reverse the transition, but the risks would be enormous. We'd be opening the door wider before trying to close it permanently. It's worth exploring, Donovan pressed. These aren't just abstract entities we are dealing with. They were children once. Our children, taken from their families. If there's any chance of bringing them back, the energy requirements would be massive, Thorne warned, and we had need something to draw their consciousness specifically, a tether to our reality. Their families, Pierce suggested. The original 7 families, most still living in Millfield. They could provide that emotional connection. And the Wonder Wheel Foundation, Donovan added. That's where the original transition occurred. The dimensional membrane is thinnest there. If we are going to attempt a reversal, that's where it needs to happen. Thorne nodded slowly. It could work, but it would mean deliberately opening a gateway on July 17th, exactly what the inhabitants want. With one critical difference, Donovan pointed out. We had controlled the gateway, set the terms of engagement. A trap, Pierce realized. Exactly. We let them think their plan is succeeding. We bring the final 7 to Wonderland under protective supervision. we allow the gateway to begin forming. But instead of enabling new transitions, we use the connection to reverse the original 7. And what about Morris? Thorne asked. He's fully aligned with the inhabitants now. He will recognize any trap. Then we need to be convincing, Donovan said. Make him believe we have failed to protect the children, that the pattern is proceeding as the inhabitants planned. The strategy took shape over the following days. The 7 identified children remained under surveillance, but with a subtle shift in approach, monitoring rather than intervention, documenting the progression of influence while preparing for controlled exposure on the anniversary. The original families were contacted discreetly. 6 agreed to participate despite the risks, clinging to hope that their long-missing children might somehow return. Only the Pattersons refused, James Patterson having died 3 years earlier, and no other family remaining in the area. Dr. Thorne worked feverishly to modify her dimensional stabilizers, converting them from barrier reinforcement to controlled gateway manipulation. The technology was experimental, based more on theoretical physics than established science, but it represented their only chance at a permanent solution. As July 17th approached, the influence on the targeted children intensified dramatically. Sleepwalking incidents increased. Dream communications became more vivid. Several children reported seeing glowing friends even while awake. Benjamin Cooper's case proved most concerning. On the night of July 15th, his surveillance team reported him missing from his bedroom. He was located an hour later standing at the perimeter fence around Wonderland, staring at the distant Wonder Wheel Foundation. When officers approached, the boy turned to them with a serene smile. "They are almost ready for us," he told the officers calmly. "2 more days, and we will all be together. We will all be free." His eyes, for just a moment, shimmered with that same inner light they had seen in the transformed children. The incident accelerated their preparations. The next day, July 16th, final arrangements were made at the Wonderland site. Thorne's equipment was positioned strategically around the Wonder Wheel Foundation. The original families were briefed on their roles. Police and scientific personnel took their positions, and across Millfield, 7 children dreamed of a wondrous place just beyond reality, where happiness was eternal and physical limitations didn't exist. They dreamed of glowing friends calling them home. They dreamed of transformation. As midnight approached, bringing the 15th anniversary of the Wonderland Disappearances, Detective Leah Donovan stood at the edge of the Baron's circular foundation, watching the air begin to shimmer with familiar dimensional instability. "They are coming," she said into her radio. "All units, prepare for Phase 1. The trap was set. The final confrontation was about to begin, and the fate of 2 worlds hung in the balance." July 17th, 2013, the 15th anniversary. Midnight at the abandoned Wonderland Park brought an unnatural stillness. The usual sounds of night, insects, distant traffic, the rustle of leaves, faded to silence as the dimensional membrane began to thin. Temperature dropped rapidly, condensing breath into visible clouds despite the summer night. The air above the Wonder Wheel's foundation shimmered with increasing intensity, reality itself seeming to ripple and flex. Positioned around the perimeter, Dr. Thorne's modified equipment hummed quietly, monitoring the fluctuations without yet intervening. The plan required precise timing, allowing the gateway to form sufficiently for their purpose, but preventing it from expanding beyond control. Leah Donovan checked her watch, 12:17 a.m. Exactly 15 years since Noah Fleming had first disappeared. "Status report," she spoke into her radio. "All families in position," came the response from Officer Rodriguez. 6 of the original families waited in a secured area 50 yards from the foundation, their presence intended to serve as emotional anchors for their missing children. "Protection teams standing by with the targets," reported Officer Jamison. The 7 identified children, Benjamin Cooper and 6 others, were being held at the Millfield Community Center under guard, supposedly for a special overnight program. Their parents had been convinced to allow their participation through carefully constructed explanations about a memorial event for the Wonderland tragedy. "Dr. Thorne, what are your readings?" Donovan asked. "Dimensional thinning progressing at expected rates," the elderly scientist replied, her voice steady despite the extraordinary circumstances. "Gateway formation approximately 28% complete, still within manageable parameters. And any sign of Morris or the inhabitants?" "Nothing yet, but they will be monitoring from their side. They know what day it is." Donovan surveyed the scene, doubt creeping in despite their preparations. The dimensional gateway between them and the transformed children represented science so advanced it bordered on magic. Their plan to reverse the transitions relied on theories that couldn't be tested in advance. If they failed, they might accelerate the very process they were trying to prevent. "Leah," Chief Pierce approached, his expression grim. "We have a problem. Benjamin Cooper is missing." Donovan's stomach dropped. "What? How?" "He was present at the 11:30 check. By the midnight count, he was gone. No signs of forced entry or exit. The community center's security cameras show him in his sleeping bag one moment, simply not there the next." Just like Morris's prison escape, Donovan realized. They are creating micro-gateways now, precise enough to extract specific individuals. If they have taken one, the others could be at risk too, Pierce warned. Donovan keyed her radio. "All protection teams, immediate head count. Confirm visual on all targets. Repeat, immediate head count." The responses came quickly, each more concerning than the last. Not just Benjamin Cooper was missing. All 7 of the targeted children had vanished within the last 30 minutes, despite being under direct surveillance in separate secured locations. "They are accelerating the process," Dr. Thorne warned, checking her instruments. "Dimensional thinning now at 41%. The pattern is nearly complete." A new voice spoke from the darkness beyond the Foundation's edge. "You can't stop what's already in motion." Detective Franklin Morris stepped into view, accompanied by Benjamin Cooper. The boy's eyes glowed with that now familiar inner light, his expression serene. Behind them, 6 more children emerged from the shadows, the remaining targets, all showing the same transformation beginning. "Morris," Donovan acknowledged, hand moving to her sidearm. "That won't be necessary," Morris said calmly. "We are not here to fight. We are here to complete what began 15 years ago." "Where are the other children?" Pierce demanded. "The 23 who disappeared this year?" "Transitioning," Morris replied. "The process takes time when done properly. The original 7 were rushed, crude transformations. We have refined our methods since then." Benjamin Cooper spoke, his voice overlaid with harmonic tones that no human throat should produce. "We are going to be so much more than we are now. We are going to be free." "Free from what?" Donovan asked, trying to buy time as officers slowly repositioned around the perimeter. "From limitation," Morris answered. "From entropy. From death itself. The inhabitants exist beyond physical constraints. Pure consciousness, experiencing all possibilities simultaneously. They have been reaching toward humanity for millennia, offering transcendence, but never had a stable gateway until Wonderland." "And what happens to everyone else when your transcendence occurs?" Pierce pressed. "The billions who aren't part of your transition?" Morris's expression showed genuine regret. "Evolution has always had casualties. When dimensional convergence completes, physical reality as you understand it will reconfigure. Those whose consciousness can adapt will transition to new forms of existence. Those who cannot will die," Donovan finished. "Will end," Morris corrected. "But isn't ending inevitable in your current form anyway? The inhabitants offer something beyond ending: consciousness without expiration, experience without boundaries." While they spoke, the dimensional membrane above the Foundation continued to thin. The shimmering air coalesced into an increasingly solid-looking portal, through which vague shapes and structures became visible. The impossible architecture of the other side. Dr. Thorne caught Donovan's eye, signaling that the gateway was approaching the necessary threshold for their plan. 58% formation, according to the monitors. They needed to reach approximately 70%, enough to establish two-way transition capability without triggering full convergence. Why these specific children? Donovan asked, continuing to stall. Why the pattern? The original 7, the spiral 23, the final 7. Dimensional mathematics, Morris explained, seemingly eager to share his knowledge. Consciousness transition requires precise harmonic resonance. The pattern creates a stable frequency cascade, each transition reinforcing the next in sequence. The original 7 established the baseline. The spiral 23 amplified and expanded it. The final 7 will complete the resonance cycle, creating a self-sustaining gateway. At exactly 3:33 a.m., Donovan guessed, remembering the timing from previous events. Morris smiled. You have been paying attention. Yes, the moment of perfect alignment, when our reality and theirs vibrate at precisely compatible frequencies. Dr. Thorne signaled again, 65%, almost there. And the original 7 children? Donovan asked. What happens to them when the convergence completes? They become the anchors, Morris said, the bridges between states of existence. They have been preparing for 15 years, learning to navigate between dimensions, understanding what they have become. As if summoned by his words, new figures appeared beyond the gateway. 7 glowing forms that gradually resolved into the familiar shapes of the Wonderland children, still appearing as they had in 1998, their eyes luminous within a light. They are here, Benjamin whispered reverently. The dimensional portal pulsed, expanding suddenly. Dr. Thorne's equipment registered the surge, 68%, 69, 71%. They had reached the threshold. Now, Donovan commanded into her radio. Dr. Thorne activated her modified equipment. The humming intensified dramatically as the devices channeled massive amounts of power into the dimensional gateway, not to close it, but to stabilize it at its current size, while modifying its harmonic frequency. Simultaneously, the 6 families moved forward into predetermined positions around the foundation, each carrying personal items belonging to their missing children, photos, favorite toys, handwritten notes, emotional anchors designed to call to their specific consciousness across the dimensional barrier. Morris reacted with alarm. What are you doing? You will destabilize the resonance pattern. That's exactly the point, Donovan confirmed. We are not trying to stop the gateway from forming. We are changing its purpose. The portal flickered violently, its edges becoming erratic. The 7 transformed children beyond it showed immediate distress, their glowing forms wavering. Parents, now, Dr. Thorne called out. Each family began speaking to their child, simple messages of love, memories, reminders of the lives they had once shared. Their voices echoed strangely through the disturbed gateway, carrying across dimensional barriers never meant for human communication. Noah, remember your 10th birthday? The rocket ship cake that collapsed? Robert Fleming called to his son's shimmering form. Remember how we laughed until we cried? Olivia, Ethan, I kept your room exactly as it was, their mother said through tears. Your science fair trophies are still on the shelf. Your cat lived to be 19. She slept on your beds every night until the day she died. One by one, the families reached across 15 years of separation, offering memories as lifelines to children who had become something else entirely. The effect was immediate and visible. The transformed children reacted to the familiar voices, their glowing forms flickering between their childlike appearances and something more fluid, less defined. Expressions of serene detachment gave way to confusion, then recognition. Mum? Noah's distorted voice called out. Dad? What's happening to them? Benjamin Cooper asked Morris, his own glowing eyes flickering uncertainly. They are trying to reverse the transition, Morris realized. using emotional connections to draw the original consciousness back to physical form. "Stop them," commanded a new voice, a harmonic chorus that seemed to emanate from everywhere and nowhere simultaneously. The air around the gateway darkened, coalescing into shadowy forms that bore only passing resemblance to human shapes. The pattern must be completed. The inhabitants had finally revealed themselves. Consciousness without fixed form, entities existing beyond physical constraints. Their presence distorted the very air, creating visual artifacts and sound patterns that human senses struggled to interpret. "The convergence will proceed," they intoned, their unified voice causing physical discomfort in all who heard it. "Resistance is temporary. Evolution is inevitable." The shadowy entities surged toward the gateway, their formless masses pressing against the dimensional barrier from the other side. The portal bulged outward, straining against Dr. Thorne's stabilization field. "They are forcing the gateway wider," Thorne shouted over the increasing dimensional turbulence. "Power levels critical." The 7 newly influenced children, Benjamin Cooper and the others, moved toward the foundation as if sleepwalking, drawn by the inhabitants' influence. Their eyes pulsed within a light, their movements becoming increasingly synchronized. "Stop them," Pierce ordered. "Don't let them reach the gateway." Officers moved to intercept, but found themselves struggling against invisible resistance. The closer they got to the children, the more difficult movement became, as if reality itself was thickening around them. "Physical intervention is futile," Morris stated, watching the unfolding chaos with scientific detachment. "They are already partially transitioned. Their consciousness exists in both states simultaneously." Beyond the gateway, the original 7 children continued to react to their families' calls. Their forms fluctuated more dramatically now, the glowing light in their eyes dimming intermittently. Memories were taking hold, emotional connections strengthening. "Mom, I can hear you," called Miguel Alvarez's voice, clearer than before. "But I can't remember how to come back." "Follow our voices," Dr. Thorne instructed the families. "Guide them step by step. Remind them of the physical world, of their bodies, of concrete sensations." The families intensified their efforts, describing family homes in precise detail, recounting the textures and smells of favorite foods, the physical sensations of hugs and kisses goodnight. The inhabitants reacted with increasing agitation. The shadowy masses churned and pulsed, emitting frequencies that caused nearby electronics to fail and humans to experience disorientation and nausea. "The anchors are destabilizing," they communicated. "The gateway harmony is disrupted. The convergence is threatened." Morris turned to Donovan, his expression conflicted. The scientist in him seemed fascinated by the unprecedented phenomena, while the part that had aligned with the inhabitants showed growing concern. "You don't understand what you are risking," he warned. "If the gateway collapses improperly, the dimensional rebound could devastate both realities. You could cause exactly what you are trying to prevent." "We are not closing it," Donovan explained. "We are reversing the flow, bringing our children home instead of sending more to them." "It's not that simple," Morris insisted. "They are not human anymore, not entirely. Their consciousness has been fundamentally altered by 15 years in the other dimension. Even if you succeed in bringing them back, they won't be the children who disappeared. They will be something in between," Dr. Thorne acknowledged. "Hybrids existing in both states, but they will be here, with their families, where they belong." The dimensional portal pulsed violently as the original 7 children moved closer to its boundary from the other side. Their forms continued to fluctuate, sometimes appearing almost solid, almost normal, before dissolving back into luminous, fluid shapes. "I can see the way back," Noah called to his parents. "But I'm afraid. What if I forget what I have learned? What if I become limited again?" "You will be home," his mother answered simply. "That's all that matters." The 7 new children had reached the edge of the foundation now, forming a circle around the perimeter. Their synchronized movements had taken on ritual qualities, arms raised, voices joined in that same melodic humming heard years before. Benjamin Cooper spoke, but his voice carried the harmonic overtones of the inhabitants. The final sequence begins. The pattern will be completed. Dr. Thorne checked her equipment readings with growing alarm. The gateway is destabilizing, dimensional harmonics fluctuating wildly. If the pattern completes before the original 7 transition back, then both processes happen simultaneously. Donovan realized, new transitions and reversals occurring together, creating unpredictable interference patterns. Thorne confirmed. A dimensional cascade failure becomes possible. Meaning both realities could collapse entirely. The situation was reaching critical threshold. The original 7 children hovered at the edge of the gateway, drawn by their families' calls but hesitant to complete the transition back. The 7 new children continued their ritual movements, the pattern nearly complete for their own transition forward. The inhabitants pressed against the dimensional barrier with increasing force, their shadowy forms beginning to seep through in tendrils of darkness. Morris watched with growing realization. "The inhabitants didn't tell me everything," he murmured. "This isn't just about transcendence. They are desperate." "Desperate for what?" Donovan asked. "To escape," Morris said, his expression clearing. "Their dimension is dying. That's why they need the children, not just as anchors, but as vessels, new consciousness to inhabit." The revelation changed everything. The transformed children weren't being elevated to some higher existence. They were being prepared as hosts for entities fleeing a collapsing reality. "They lied to you," Donovan told Morris. "Used you just like they used the children." Morris's face hardened. "They promised knowledge, understanding. They showed me wonders beyond human comprehension. But this..." He looked at the 7 children around the perimeter, at Benjamin Cooper's vacant expression and glowing eyes, at the shadowy tendrils seeping through the gateway, reaching toward them with obvious intent. "This is possession," he concluded, "not transcendence." Morris moved suddenly, breaking free from the officers who had been watching him. But instead of fleeing, he strode purposefully toward Dr. Thorne's equipment. "What are you doing?" she demanded, as he began adjusting settings. "Modifying the harmonic resonance," he explained rapidly. "Creating a standing wave that will reinforce your reverse transition while canceling the forward pattern. That could collapse the gateway entirely," Thorne warned. "Exactly," Morris confirmed. "It needs to be closed, permanently. But first we get those children back." Working together, Morris and Thorne recalibrated the equipment. The dimensional portal responded immediately, its edges stabilizing even as its internal structure shifted. The inhabitants' shadowy tendrils recoiled, unable to penetrate the modified harmonic field. "Original families, now's your chance," Morris called out. "The gateway is stabilized temporarily. Call them through now." The families renewed their efforts with desperate intensity, reaching out physically and emotionally across the dimensional barrier. The 7 transformed children moved closer to the gateway's edge, their forms solidifying further as they responded. "I can feel it," called Zoe Patterson's voice. "I remember being solid, having edges." "That's right, sweetheart," her aunt responded, the only family she had left. "Remember how it feels to have a body, to breathe, to touch." "The connection is strengthening," Thorne reported, watching her instruments. "Consciousness patterns aligning with physical templates. They are remembering who they were." The 7 new children around the perimeter began to falter in their ritual, their synchronized movements becoming erratic as the inhabitants' influence weakened. Benjamin Cooper blinked, the glow in his eyes dimming momentarily. "What's happening?" he asked, his voice briefly his own again. "Where am I?" "Stay with us," Benjamin, Donovan called to him. "Focus on my voice. Remember who you are." The dimensional portal pulsed dramatically. The original 7 children stood directly at its threshold now, visible more clearly than ever before. Their forms had solidified significantly, still glowing faintly, still not entirely human, but recognizably the children who had disappeared 15 years ago, seemingly unchanged by time. "I'm scared," Noah admitted, looking back at the roiling darkness behind him. "They don't want us to leave." "We will protect you," his father promised. "Just step through. Come home." Noah Fleming took a deep breath, a remarkably human gesture for a being who had existed without physical form for 15 years, and stepped forward. The gateway rippled around him as he passed through, emerging fully on the physical side for the first time since. His appearance was startling. He looked exactly as he had at 12 years old, his physical form preserved at the moment of transition, but his eyes retained a subtle luminescence, and his movements had an otherworldly fluidity that suggested he wasn't entirely bound by normal physics. "Mom, Dad," he said, his voice sounding strange to his own ears. "I'm back." His parents rushed forward, embracing him with 15 years of pent-up grief and longing. The moment they touched him, a visible wave of energy pulsed outward from the contact point, as if their physical connection had grounded some aspect of his dimensional instability. Seeing Noah's successful transition, the other children followed quickly. One by one, they stepped through the gateway. Olivia and Ethan Reeves, Miguel Alvarez, Zoe Patterson, Lily Hammond, and finally Daniel Thompson. All appeared exactly as they had in 1998, physically unchanged by 15 years in another dimension. All retained subtle signs of their transformation: luminescent eyes, unusual movement patterns, an aura of energy that cameras would later show, but human eyes could only sense peripherally. As the last child crossed through, the inhabitants reacted with unmistakable rage. The shadowy masses beyond the gateway churned violently, the dimensional barrier bulging under their assault. "The anchors are reclaimed," their harmonic voice boomed. "But the pattern will still complete. The gateway will still form. We will still emerge." The 7 new children, Benjamin and the others, suddenly snapped back into synchronized movement, their eyes blazing with renewed inner light. The ritual resumed with heightened intensity, the pattern approaching completion. "Morris, we need to close it now," Donovan shouted above the dimensional turbulence. "Not yet," he responded, still working with Dr. Thorne. "The resonance pattern has to collapse naturally. If we force it, the rebound could be catastrophic." "How long?" "Minutes, maybe less." The inhabitants pressed harder against the barrier, their shadowy tendrils finding new gaps, seeping through in greater quantity. Where they touched physical reality, distortions formed, objects aging rapidly or reverting to raw materials, plant life growing and dying in seconds, spatial dimensions flexing unnaturally. "They are breaking through," Pierce warned, watching the spreading anomalies. The 7 returned children turned toward the gateway, their expressions shifting from confusion to determination. Noah stepped forward. "We know how to stop them," he said, his voice carrying that same harmonic quality but now controlled, focused. "We know their frequencies. We lived in them for 15 years. "You can't go back in there," his mother protested, clutching his arm. "We are not going back," Noah assured her. "But we are not entirely here either. We exist in both states now. We can create interference patterns they can't penetrate." The 7 children moved to form a circle, facing the dimensional gateway. As they joined hands, visible energy flowed between them, creating a circuit that pulsed in opposition to the inhabitants' harmonic patterns. "They are generating a counter-resonance," Morris observed with astonishment, cancelling the frequencies that allowed dimensional transfer. The effect was immediate. The shadowy tendrils recoiled from the barrier, unable to maintain cohesion against the children's counter-resonance. The gateway itself began to contract, its edges becoming more defined even as its area diminished. "It's working," Dr. Thorne confirmed, checking her instruments. dimensional stability increasing, gateway collapse proceeding in controlled sequence. The 7 new children broke free from their ritual trance as the inhabitants' influence weakened. Benjamin Cooper collapsed to his knees, the glow fading completely from his eyes. "What happened?" he asked, dazed and disoriented. "Why are we at the old amusement park?" The others showed similar confusion, their memories of the past hours apparently blocked. Officers moved to assist them, leading them away from the collapsing gateway. The inhabitants made one final desperate attempt to force the gateway open. The shadowy masses surged forward in unison, generating a harmonic pulse that momentarily overwhelmed the children's counter-resonance. Dimensional spike. Thorne warned. Stability compromised. The gateway expanded suddenly, a rush of otherworldly energy pouring through. For a brief, terrifying moment, reality itself seemed to tremble on the edge of collapse. Normal physics stuttered, gravity fluctuated, time briefly ran at different rates for different people, matter phased between solid and energy states. Morris moved decisively, adjusting the equipment to channel the dimensional surge. "We can use their own energy against them," he explained rapidly. "Create a feedback loop that collapses the gateway from their side. That would trap you there," Donovan realized, seeing what he intended. "Your consciousness is already partially aligned with their dimension. You had be pulled through when the gateway inverts." Morris smiled sadly. "I helped create this situation. It's fitting that I help end it." He looked at the returned children with genuine wonder. "Besides, I have always wanted to understand what exists beyond our limited perception. Now I will get my chance." Before anyone could stop him, Morris activated the modified sequence. The dimensional energy reversed direction instantly, flowing back through the gateway like water down a drain. The portal contracted rapidly, its edges becoming unstable. Morris stepped to the edge of the foundation, facing the rapidly shrinking gateway. 15 years searching for transcendence, he said quietly. Let's see if it was worth it. As the portal collapsed to a single point, Morris was drawn through. Not physically, but something more fundamental, as if his very essence was being extracted from his body. For a brief moment, his form appeared to exist in both places simultaneously, his physical self remaining while his consciousness visibly transferred through the dimensional singularity. Then the gateway snapped closed with a thunderclap of imploding energy. Morris's body crumpled, empty of the consciousness that had animated it. The Wonder Wheel Foundation lay quiet and ordinary in the pre-dawn darkness. No shimmer in the air, no temperature fluctuations, no dimensional membrane, just weathered concrete in an abandoned amusement park. Dr. Thorne checked her instruments. Dimensional readings normal. No residual gateway energy. The connection is severed. Donovan looked at Morris's empty body, then at the 7 children who had returned after 15 impossible years. Is it over? The gateway is closed, Noah answered, his slightly luminescent eyes somber. But what we became there, that doesn't just go away. We are something different now, something in between. What happens to you now? Pierce asked. You haven't aged in 15 years. You are not entirely normal. We don't know, Olivia Reeves admitted. Nobody's ever done this before. Been what we were, then come back to be something new. We will figure it out together, her mother said firmly, holding her daughter's hand. All that matters is you are home. The aftermath unfolded gradually in the weeks and months that followed. The official explanation involved a complex kidnapping case finally resolved. The children having been held in isolation since now, their apparent lack of aging was attributed to a rare genetic condition. Details classified for their privacy. Few believed the cover story completely, but most accepted it as preferable to contemplating the truth. The 7 returned children adjusted to their new existence with varying degrees of success. They retained abilities that defied conventional understanding, limited prescience, the capacity to perceive energy fields invisible to normal humans, occasional manipulation of local physical laws. More challenging was adapting to a world that had moved forward, 15 years without them. Their families had aged. Technology had advanced dramatically. Cultural references had shifted. They remained physically 12 to 14 years old, but with consciousnesses that had experienced something beyond human comprehension. Benjamin Cooper and the 6 other targeted children recovered fully, with no memory of their near transition. They stopped drawing the spiral star symbol, stopped reporting strange dreams. The influence had been broken completely when the gateway closed. The 23 children who had disappeared in the spiral pattern were never found. Whether they had completed their transitions to the other dimension or existed in some intermediate state following the gateway's collapse remained unknown. Morris's body was buried with minimal ceremony, his consciousness presumably existing somewhere beyond physical reality. Whether he found the transcendence he sought or merely traded one form of limitation for another, no one could say. Dr. Thorne documented everything, creating a scientific record of dimensional phenomena that most of her colleagues dismissed as theoretical fantasy. She continued monitoring for signs of renewed activity, but the dimensional barriers remained stable. Whatever the inhabitants had been attempting had failed, at least for now. Detective Leah Donovan remained in contact with the returned children, becoming something of a surrogate aunt to them as they navigated their unique existence. Their insights sometimes helped her solve seemingly impossible cases, their perceptions extending beyond normal human limitations. The Wonderland Park property was finally developed 5 years later, not as a shopping center but as a memorial park dedicated to the 23 children who never returned. At its center, where the Wonder Wheel once stood, a circular fountain featured 7 pillars surrounding a spiraling water pattern. Most visitors saw only an artistic water feature, but the returned children, when they visited, could see the thin places in reality around it. Not dangerous, not gateways, just windows where the dimensional membrane remained slightly more transparent than elsewhere. And sometimes, in those thin places, they caught glimpses of Franklin Morris. His form evolved into something neither human nor inhabitant, but a bridge between states of being. He appeared to be studying the dimensional boundaries, mapping them, understanding them in ways his scientific mind had always yearned to do. Whether he was prisoner or explorer in that other reality remained unclear, but he seemed purposeful, even at peace with his transformation. The returned children never spoke publicly about what they had experienced during their 15 years beyond physical reality, but in private moments they described consciousness without boundaries, perception without filters, existence without linear time. It wasn't all bad, Noah Fleming once told Donovan. Parts of it were beautiful beyond description. We experienced things no human ever has. Do you regret coming back? She asked. Noah considered, his luminescent eyes reflecting complexities beyond his apparent 12 years. We were manipulated, used as tools for something that would have destroyed countless lives. That part I regret. But what we became, what we still partly are. He smiled, a strangely adult expression on his child's face. That's a gift, even if it came with a price. And the inhabitants? Are they gone for good? Nothing is gone for good, Noah replied. Dimensions touch in countless places. Realities overlap like pages in a book. The gateway we came through is closed, but others exist. Always have. Should we be worried? Vigilant, he corrected. The inhabitants' dimension is still failing. They are still seeking escape, but they learn from this attempt. Next time, they will be more subtle, more patient. And when that happens, Noah's eyes flared briefly within a light. We will know. We can sense the thin places now, monitor them, and if necessary, remind them that humanity isn't as limited as they thought. The conversation lingered in Donovan's mind years later, as she watched the returned children grow older, slowly at perhaps 1/3 the normal human rate, but aging nonetheless. Becoming teenagers in their 20s, their luminescence dimming slightly but never disappearing entirely. They remained connected to something beyond normal human experience, ambassadors of a reality most people would never perceive, guardians of dimensional boundaries they alone could fully sense. And sometimes on summer nights when the air hung heavy and still, Donovan would visit the memorial fountain at the former Wonderland site. Sitting on a bench near the circular water feature, she would listen for distant carousel music, for children's laughter carried on the breeze. Usually she heard only normal night sounds, insects, distant traffic, the gentle splash of the fountain. But occasionally, just at the edge of perception, other sounds seemed to filter through, harmonies impossible for human throats to produce. Rhythms that followed no earthly time signature. Reminders that reality was vaster and stranger than most humans ever realized. That consciousness could exist in forms beyond physical understanding. That dimensions touched and separated in an eternal dance of possibility. The 7 children who vanished from Wonderland Park in 1998 had returned, changed but recognizable. The horror inside the park had been confronted and contained, but the greater horror and the greater wonder of what existed beyond normal perception remained, waiting just beyond the thin places in reality where children with luminescent eyes could see what others could not, and where the spiral star symbol still appeared occasionally in the dreams of those sensitive enough to glimpse between worlds. Because some doors, once opened, can never be completely closed. Some boundaries, once crossed, leave permanent markers, and some stories, like some dimensions, continue beyond what we can see or understand, infinite in their variations, eternal in their unfolding. The real horror was never just inside the park. The real horror was knowing what waits beyond the boundaries of our reality, watching, patient, eternal. And the real wonder was the same.